If you think all ground beef is created equal, you're about to discover a truth that could turn your next burger into a biology experiment. Behind the bright red packaging and fresh daily labels, some of America's biggest supermarkets are selling ground beef that's more science project than dinner. What looks like a simple protein choice might actually be a gamble with your health, your wallet, and your taste buds. From meat that's been sitting longer than your last Netflix binge to packages that hide more than just the price per pound, the ground beef aisle has become a minefield of shortcuts, misleading labels, and practices that would make your grandmother's butcher weep. You walk in thinking you're making a smart choice for Taco Tuesday, but you might be walking out with something that barely qualifies as food. Let's start with the biggest offender in the meat game, a place where fresh is more of a suggestion than a guarantee. Walmart's ground beef section is a masterclass in making customers believe they're getting quality when they're really getting chemistry. Walk up to Walmart's meat case and you'll see those familiar plastic-wrapped packages of ground beef, bright red and seemingly fresh. But here's what they don't tell you on the label. Much of that fresh ground beef has been sitting in distribution centers for up to 2 weeks before it even hits the store shelf. A former Walmart meat department employee from Texas revealed, "We got shipments of ground beef that were already pushing their limits. The dates looked fine, but the smell when you opened the cases told a different story. The color you see isn't always natural either." Walmart, like many large retailers, uses a process called modified atmosphere packaging, which pumps carbon monoxide into the packages to keep the meat looking red and fresh long after it should have turned brown. One food scientist described it as makeup for meat. It looks good on the surface, but underneath, the quality might be deteriorating. Temperature control is another silent killer. Internal audits from multiple Walmart locations have shown that ground beef display cases often run warmer than the required 40 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes reaching 45 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit during busy periods. That might not sound like much, but for ground beef, it's the difference between safe and sorry. Former employees have admitted that when coolers malfunction, the meat often stays out longer than company policy allows because restocking takes time and labor costs money. Then there's the grind itself. Unlike your local butcher who might grind chuck roast or sirloin in small batches, Walmart's ground beef comes from massive processing facilities where thousands of pounds are ground together. This means one contaminated batch can affect hundreds of packages. A USDA inspector who worked at a facility supplying Walmart said, "When you're processing that volume, quality control becomes more about speed than safety. If something looks questionable, there's pressure to keep the line moving." The fat content is another area where Walmart cuts corners. That 80-20 ground beef might technically meet the label requirements, but the fat often comes from trimmings that include connective tissue, cartilage, and other parts that affect texture and flavor. Customers frequently complain that their burgers fall apart or release excessive grease, leaving them with a patty that resembles more of a grease sponge than meat. Customer complaints paint a disturbing picture. Online reviews mention packages that smell off before the expiration date, meat that turns gray within hours of opening, and ground beef that produces an unusual amount of liquid when cooked. One shopper from Florida posted photos of ground beef that separated into layers when cooked, with clear liquid pooling at the bottom of the pan. That's not normal meat behavior. That's a sign of added water and fillers. But if you think Walmart is bad, wait until you hear about Kroger's approach to ground beef. This chain has perfected the art of making old meat look new, and their tactics might surprise you. Kroger operates one of the largest meat processing networks in the country, but bigger doesn't always mean better. Multiple former employees have revealed that Kroger uses a practice called reworking expired ground beef. When packages approach their sell-by date, they're often reground with fresher meat to extend shelf life. One former butcher from Ohio explained, "We'd take the stuff that was about to expire, mix it with newer product, and repackage it. Technically legal, but definitely not what customers think they're buying." The labeling at Kroger is particularly misleading. Their Simple Truth organic ground beef sounds clean and healthy, but investigations have shown that some of this meat comes from cattle raised on industrial farms that barely meet organic standards. The animals might not get antibiotics, but they're still crowded into feedlots and fed organic corn instead of grass. You're paying premium prices for industrial meat with an organic sticker. Temperature abuse is rampant at many Kroger locations. Health inspections from 2023 found that over 30% of tested stores had ground beef display cases running above safe temperatures. In one Georgia location, inspectors found meat at 52 degrees Fahrenheit, well into the danger zone where bacteria multiply rapidly. When questioned, the manager said they were working on getting it fixed, but the meat stayed on display for sale. Kroger's pre-formed patties are another red flag. These convenient burger patties often contain sodium phosphates to retain moisture and prevent shrinkage, but they also mask the taste of lower quality meat. The texture becomes artificially firm, and the flavor profile shifts from natural beef to something more processed. One food technologist described it as beef-flavored Play-Doh that holds its shape no matter how you cook it. Cross-contamination is also a major concern. Former employees have reported seeing the same equipment used for different grades of meat without proper cleaning between batches. Ground chuck and ground sirloin might share processing equipment, meaning you could be paying sirloin prices for chuck quality. The mixing happens behind the scenes, and customers have no way to know. The sourcing is equally questionable. Kroger sources meat from multiple suppliers, and the origin can change week to week depending on pricing contracts. That locally sourced label might be technically true if the processing plant is in your state, but the cattle could have come from anywhere in the country. Traceability becomes nearly impossible, especially if there's ever a contamination issue. Customer experiences with Kroger ground beef tell a consistent story of disappointment. Reviews mention meat that shrinks dramatically when cooked, leaving behind pools of fat and water. Others describe a metallic aftertaste that no amount of seasoning can mask. One customer from Michigan said their ground beef produced so much liquid when browning that they wondered if it had been injected with water to increase weight. Moving on to our third offender, let's talk about Safeway, the chain that tries to look upscale but delivers discount quality at premium prices. Safeway positions itself as a step above discount groceries, and their meat department reflects this with attractive displays and higher prices. But behind the polished presentation, their ground beef practices reveal a different story. The meat often comes from the same industrial suppliers as discount chains, just with fancier packaging and markup. One of Safeway's most concerning practices is their Manager's Special program for meat approaching expiration. Instead of discounting the product significantly or removing it from shelves, they often repackage it in smaller portions with new dates. A former meat department supervisor from California admitted, "We'd take the family packs that weren't selling and break them down into smaller packages. As long as we processed it that day, we could extend the date by 24 to 48 hours. The quality control at Safeway is inconsistent across locations. Some stores maintain high standards, while others operate more like assembly lines focused on moving product quickly. In busy urban locations, former employees report that meat inspection often gets skipped during rush periods. Ground beef packages with small tears or condensation inside still make it to the display case because staff don't have time for thorough quality checks. Safeway's organic and grass-fed options aren't immune to problems either. Despite premium pricing, much of their grass-fed beef comes from cattle that were only grass-fed for the final months of their lives, not from birth. This practice, called grass-finished, is legal but misleading. Customers pay extra thinking they're getting cattle that lived on pasture their entire lives, when reality is much different. The grinding process at Safeway often involves mixing different cuts to achieve desired fat ratios, but this can include less desirable parts like beef heart and tongue. While these organs are nutritious, they're not what most customers expect when buying ground beef. The texture and flavor can be noticeably different, especially in their leaner blends. Temperature fluctuations are another ongoing issue. Safeway's display cases are often opened frequently by customers selecting packages, causing temperature spikes. Without proper monitoring, meat can spend significant time in unsafe temperature ranges. One former employee described seeing ground beef packages that felt warm to the touch during busy weekend periods. Cross-contamination risks are elevated at Safeway due to their practice of grinding multiple types of meat in the same equipment throughout the day. Beef, pork, and turkey might all be processed using the same grinder, with only basic cleaning between different products. For customers with allergies or dietary restrictions, this poses serious risks that aren't disclosed on packaging. The fourth store on our list might surprise you because of its reputation for quality, but Whole Foods has ground beef secrets that don't match their wholesome image. Whole Foods markets itself as the premium option for conscious consumers, and their ground beef prices reflect this positioning. But several practices behind the scenes suggest you might not be getting the quality you're paying for. Despite the organic and grass-fed labels, much of their ground beef comes from large industrial operations that meet minimum standards rather than the small family farms customers envision. The 365 store. Brand ground beef at Whole Foods is particularly misleading. While it meets organic certification requirements, it often comes from cattle raised in confined feeding operations that are technically organic but far from the pastoral scenes suggested by marketing. The animals eat organic grain instead of conventional feed, but they're still crowded into feedlots with minimal access to pasture. Former employees have revealed that Whole Foods uses aggressive pricing strategies on meat nearing expiration. Instead of discounting packages transparently, they often incorporate older meat into prepared foods like meatballs or burger patties sold in the prepared food section. Customers pay premium prepared food prices for meat that was approaching its sell-by date as raw product. The grinding practices at Whole Foods vary significantly by location. Some stores grind meat fresh daily, while others rely on pre-ground product from regional facilities. The freshness you think you're paying for might actually be several days old by the time it reaches the display case. Without clear labeling about grind dates, customers have no way to distinguish truly fresh product from older inventory. Quality control issues plague many Whole Foods locations despite their reputation. Health inspections have found temperature violations, improper storage, and cross-contamination issues at various stores. In one Texas location, inspectors discovered ground beef stored above cooked foods, creating potential drip contamination. The violation was corrected, but it raises questions about ongoing practices. The grass-fed labels at Whole Foods often don't tell the complete story. Many products labeled as grass-fed come from cattle that were grass-fed for only the final portion of their lives, typically 3 to 4 months. The majority of their growth occurred on grain-based diets in conventional operations. While technically accurate, this labeling misleads customers who assume grass-fed means pasture-raised from birth. Pricing manipulation is another concern. Whole Foods often has sales on ground beef that appear significant, but price comparisons show these sale prices are often close to regular prices at conventional supermarkets. The high regular prices make moderate discounts seem like better deals than they actually are. Finally, let's examine our last offender, a store that combines bulk buying with questionable meat practices. Costco. Costco's ground beef comes in those massive packages that seem like great deals until you realize what you're actually getting. The meat is sourced from large industrial operations and ground in enormous batches, increasing the risk that one contaminated source affects thousands of pounds of product. When problems occur, they affect a much larger number of customers than smaller-scale operations. The packaging size creates its own problems. Those 4 to 5 pound packages of ground beef are more than most families can use fresh, forcing customers to freeze portions. But the quality of ground beef degrades quickly after freezing and thawing, losing moisture and developing texture changes that affect the final product. What seemed like a bargain becomes inferior meat that doesn't cook or taste as expected. Former Costco employees have revealed that the meat department operates under intense pressure to move product quickly. Quality checks that might catch questionable meat sometimes get skipped during busy periods. One former butcher from Washington state said, "When you're processing hundreds of pounds per hour, you don't have time to inspect every package thoroughly. Sometimes stuff gets through that shouldn't." The fat content in Costco's ground beef can be inconsistent despite label claims. The massive scale of processing means fat ratios are achieved through blending rather than careful selection of cuts. This can result in packages where fat is unevenly distributed, leading to burgers that fall apart or meatloaf that releases excessive grease. Temperature control in Costco's large display cases can be challenging to maintain consistently. The cases are opened frequently by customers and employees, and the large volume of meat creates thermal mass that can hide temperature fluctuations. Product in the center of large packages may stay warm longer than surface meat, creating potential safety issues. The organic options at Costco aren't immune to problems either. Much of their organic ground beef comes from cattle operations that meet certification requirements but operate at industrial scale. The animals may not receive antibiotics or hormones, but they're still raised in conditions far different from the small farm image associated with organic products. Costco's return policy, while customer-friendly, creates another set of issues. Customers can return meat products for full refund even after taking them home, but returned products sometimes get discounted and resold rather than discarded. While this might technically be safe if handled properly, it means some fresh ground beef has been in and out of temperature-controlled environments multiple times. The truth about ground beef quality extends beyond just these 5 stores, but these retailers represent some of the most problematic practices in the industry. From temperature abuse to misleading labeling to processing shortcuts that prioritize profit over quality, the ground beef aisle has become a place where informed consumers need to be more careful than ever. The solution isn't to avoid ground beef entirely, but to shop smarter. Look for local butchers who grind meat fresh daily. Ask questions about sourcing and grinding practices. Check for proper temperatures in display cases. And most importantly, trust your senses. If something smells off, looks questionable, or doesn't feel right, don't buy it. Your family's health is worth more than saving a few dollars on questionable meat. When you know what to look for and which stores to avoid, you can still enjoy ground beef without the worry that comes with these problematic retailers. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Now you're officially more informed than most customers. Like and subscribe to help us keep the spotlight on the food industry's best-kept secrets. And remember, the truth is not always on the menu.